And we're back with another episode of the InfoTech podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Huber, as always. And it seems to be an AI trend these days. If you're a regular listener, you know that I've had multiple people and guests on talking about the advancements with artificial intelligence, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And today is no exception to that, but we have a twist. My guest is a PhD in cognitive science. He's got 30 years of experience in AI. He's not only, I think, forging ahead in the frontiers, but he's been in this industry much longer than anyone I've had on or have heard of, frankly. His name is Arshavir Blackwell, and I really appreciate you spending the time with us, and welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, you bet. We'll get to your app in a minute. I think a lot of
Okay.
people are going to enjoy hearing about that and
Yeah.
even being able to try it out. But I want to try to kind of take you back in time. I always want to give my audience the feel for who we're talking to here. So if you
Got it.
wouldn't mind, Arshavir, take a couple of minutes and just tell us about your background. Obviously, you've had a lot of years in this space, but
Yeah.
how did you come, to make this app, and what kind of brought you here?
Well, it's been a long trip. I was even as a kid, I was one of those kids that was always interested in computers and technology and science fiction, and so that led me to study cognitive science and computer science. And I got my doctoral degree, my graduate degree, at UC San Diego, and I was really fortunate because I got to work with two of the real top people in the field at the time, Jeffrey Ellman and Elizabeth Bates. And Ellman was one of the people that developed some of the earliest neural network technologies that is, of course, quite primitive compared to what we're seeing today. But at the time, it was really quite revolutionary and it's definitely foundational. So a lot of the models that he created are the basis for some of the models that we see today actually employed in large language models. So after that, I worked for a series of mostly startups, and my interest was in bringing neural networks to the masses, sort of. So I always saw that the technology had an enormous value and an enormous potential. And unfortunately, it was kind of cutting edge, and there was a lot of controversy around it amongst some people. And so the problem was that, to some extent, um, you had to kind of, with some people at least, fight to get your ideas out there. It was sometimes challenging because this was very new, cutting edge technology. But I think we did a lot of good work, and I think we created a lot of really cool applications. So that's what led me basically to where I am now. I have a Substack where it's inside the blackbox.ai, and it's all about looking inside how these models work and understanding what's going on when you type in something and you get a response at the other end. So the surprise to a lot of people is that even the people that have built these things, they've built systems that are so incredibly complicated that they don't themselves understand really what's going on inside them.
Mm,
They
yeah.
know they put an input and they get out some reasonable output, but they don't really get, if you change this one thing, what happens and why. We don't really have a good understanding of how they work yet. And so that's an area of great interest to me. The other area that I really find fascinating is the area of voice analysis and basically taking a set of writing samples from an individual and using that to create a sort of voice print so that the local language model can write in that person's voice. And I think we found, a lot of people who've used large language models will say they're very powerful, but when they write, they all sound the same. And so when I
Totally.
try to write
Yep.
something, I end up having to rewrite it in my own voice, which kind of makes the whole point of using a large language model
Yeah. Defeats the
really,
purpose for sure.
yeah, it defeats the purpose exactly. So
Yeah.
what this does, it's what's called a local large language model. And that's in contrast to the large language models most people are used to right now are things like ChatGPT and Claude. And those are frontier language models. And what that means simply is that they're at the very edge, the cutting edge of technology in terms of what kinds of computations and algorithms and processes they can do. And they're online. So they're never on your machine. What you're doing is basically connecting to a cloud service, typing something in, sending it out to that service, and then getting something back. A local LLM can be completely contained on your own machine if you wanted to, or in a local server that's not ChatGPT or not Claude or doesn't belong to Anthropic. And there are a lot of reasons why, surprisingly, that's actually a better model. One of those is security. So a lot of people work with things like HIPAA compliance, legal compliance,
Oh, sure.
and
Yep.
they don't really feel comfortable sending a lot of information that's supposedly secure information or that can't risk being hacked into out to Anthropic or out to OpenAI. And they even say when you're using it, this is not a confidential channel. Don't put passwords in here. Don't put anything in here that you would be afraid of having leak out accidentally.
Sure.
And of course,
Yeah.
they also can use the data that you send them, the information that you send them, as training data for their own models. So what you're working on can appear later on somewhere in their model.
Yeah,
So
whether
that's
you
not a
know it or
great
not.
thing.
Yeah,
Whether you
sure.
know it or not, they're not going to tell you, of course.
Right.
The
Right.
other thing is, of course, those models really eat up money very quickly. So, if you're paying by the token and you use 100,000 tokens or something like that in a project, I mean, it can become, you can get a very large bill very quickly.
A lot of overhead. Sure.
There's a lot of overhead. If you're using a local language model, especially if it's on your machine, it's free because you're just using your machine. So it's
Yeah,
just
you're
like
providing
using
your own compute instead of
your
farming it
provide.
out to a data center or
Exactly.
whatnot. Sure.
Exactly. So you're not paying for that. And the other advantage of a local language model is it allows you to do this personalization, which you can't do with frontier models. So there's no way to change the underlying mechanism of the frontier model so that it sounds more like you. There's no knobs or buttons or anything like that to kind of tweak. With the local language model, you can put what's called an adapter on it, and the adapter learns your voice from what it is you've written, and it then starts to take on that exact voice when it writes new material. And so I've run some examples on really strong voices. And if you look at, say, I've trained it on Twain, I've trained it on Edgar Allan Poe, I've trained it on Shakespeare, I've trained it on a lot of different very well-known authors. And if you just take, and you can actually see this on the website, if you type something in and you have it write as Twain, it sounds extremely different than if you have it write as Poe or Shakespeare or Hemingway. And
Sure.
the reason this doesn't work on frontier models is because the frontier model hasn't really been trained to absorb the actual cadence and the actual sort of the metrics that make up your voice. So what it does is it puts on a costume. It'll say, if you're doing Twain, for example, it'll say, I reckon, and let's, and things like that. Let's
Sure.
let's go yonder. But it's not going to actually,
Clunky. Yeah.
yes, it's very clunky. It's not going to take on the style of Twain or Poe or of you. And that's one of the big advantages of using the local large language model is it permits you to do a lot of personalization in a really big way. And we're finding now just all sorts of new applications and uses for it once you've captured that individual's voice and their work product.
Yeah. So let me back up just a little bit because
Sure.
you said a ton of stuff there that I want to make sure our audience understands. So
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
agree that I think most people are used to ChatGPT, Gemini. They may not know it's an LLM, but they know that hey,
Yeah,
this is the new Google, and it seems to be a little bit better, right? Like just
right.
skimming the surface. Or you've got some professionals, young professionals maybe, or business leaders that are trying to augment it, but yeah, like you said, it spends more time training or to make it even passable than the time it maybe saves you, or the
Yeah.
results just aren't good enough for prime time. So you got a lot of
Yes.
dabbling, a lot of testing, etc. Your app here specifically takes away the model that all those work in and says, hey, you can take the value of an LLM, you can run it locally on what your phone, your desktop computer, or whatnot,
Yep.
and you can actually spend a little time training it and giving it information that you've generated itself, and it's going to be what 50% better, 20% better. I mean, we talked numbers I think last time a little bit. What can be the expectation here? Because I would think some people say, well, I'm doing that already with Claude or something. It knows me really
Yeah.
well. What do you say to that?
This will give you a much better result. So, in some of the tests that I've run, let's say that you give Claude a passage and ask it to uh, write it in the style of, for example, Mark Twain. If you evaluate that, let's say based on some metrics, the different stylometric metrics that we use, that it gives you like a score of 45 when a base would be a 20. What we find when we run it through the LLM, that's the local model, when we actually train it, it's let's say 75 or 80.
Oh wow.
And there's no real mystery as to why that is. It's because you're actually changing the weights of the system so that all of the decisions that it's making have been changed at a very fundamental level. In the frontier models, the chat GPTs and so forth, you don't have that. What you're doing is you're giving it just a verbal command, write like Twain,
Hmm.
and it's kind of putting a costume on what it would have done anyway. And that's
Right.
the reason why there's such a big difference. So this is an interesting example of where frontier models are really good for a lot of things, but it's an interesting example of where local, smaller language models are actually better. And the thing that I always like to sort of point out to people is while they're very powerful, you don't always need a frontier model, a super
Yeah.
large frontier model.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't, if you have a destroyer or a speedboat, the speedboat will get you across the lake just as, well as the destroyer. So the frontier model is very powerful and has a lot of things that the small model can't do. But in this one particular use case, we're finding it actually is not only as good, but it's actually quite a bit better.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Most people, I don't think, realize what they're writing in at all, if they even know they're on the water. to,
Yeah,
to take your analogy further, so
exactly.
you're attacking the specific, probably overarching mainstream frustration with AI is that it doesn't sound like me. It's not actually helpful. I would never send information to this person as me because it's not me, right? And people are already
Yeah,
starting to pick up on that. So you're saying,
exactly.
hey, you can take it local, but you don't need a ton of resources because you're simplifying it. You're giving them the speedboat, right? Which is all they need essentially anyway. So that I
Exactly.
would think would probably be a lot cheaper then too, because most people are figuring out unless you get a paid version of Chat or Gemini or whatever, they kind of suck, right? Like you
Yeah,
have to invest at a certain point, and I think those price points might go up as at least at the enterprise level, the token usage
yeah,
is just nuts. All
yeah.
the things I'm reading now are people are realizing, hey, it actually is cheaper to hire humans at scale, right?
Yes,
So you're attacking and addressing multiple of these things.
absolutely, absolutely. And that's the thing is that people are not as familiar with the local large language model, partially because it's not kind of as front and center in the media and it's not as sexy sounding, but also because sometimes people actually in some websites are using them. They just don't realize that that's what they're using. So there are a lot of websites where the back end does not necessarily connect to ChatGPT or something like that, where they are running a local large language model on their servers, but um, no one really is exposed to that unless they go through and read the fine print, which of course no one ever does.
Got it. Sure, of course. Yeah. So
Yeah,
walk me through maybe the nuts and bolts. If people are still listening, they're definitely intrigued, right, to this
yeah,
most likely. I know that when agentic AI pieces started coming out, people were loading it and realizing like, hey, to do things locally is pretty technical. Like unless you're, really in the industry, it can be kind of maybe daunting. What's it
Yeah,
like to set up your app? Because I would assume there's some, installation or pieces required to get it running on whatever equipment,
right.
they have.
Well, so right now the version that I have is working, but it's sort of like a working demo. So it really works. People can really use it, but it's a software as a service. So it's on
Ah, got it.
a server that is not connected to ChatGPT and not connected to Claude, and your information never leaves that one server. But if, let's say, a large company wanted to use this same technology and completely enclose it inside, their walled garden, then they could easily just install all of the same software on their internal servers and use it there, or even on an individual computer and use it there. So what we have now is
You're
because it's just a
licensing it in
lot.
that case. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
exactly. They're licensing it. And so, right now to demonstrate the technology, it's just a lot easier to have software as a service where you just go to a web page and do a few clicks rather than have someone download software and have to debug. I mean, there is actually a downloadable version of it, but we don't offer it right now because, it's just there would be so much technical setup, and
Yeah, that's
it's
what I
a
was
little
trying to
bit
get at.
harder.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's why it's software as a service now. But the
Perfect.
way it works basically is you just go there, you create an account, and we have free beta accounts available right now. And you can do a couple things. One is for free without even putting in, not even having to open an account. You can have it analyze your voice. So you paste in some examples of documents that are very characteristic of your writing. And it will give you a stylometric analysis that says things like you tend to use M dashes more than most people. You tend to use abbreviations less than most people, and so on and so forth.
Sure.
And what it also gives you for free is a prompt that you actually can use with ChatGPT or
Uh,
Claude. So you can just copy and paste this prompt, and it will say, I speak like this, and it will give all the stylometrics of how the stylometric analysis has
sure.
resolved. And it will give selected snippets of what you've said, not the whole thing because that would overload it, but just very characteristic snippets.
You can
And
train other models better.
well, this is really not for training. This is for using just as a sort of to give as an example of the kinds of things you can do when you personalize. You can use it with ChatGPT, you can use it with Claude, but the results, as I've said, I mean, we've done comparisons, and it's better than if you didn't use it, but it's just still nowhere as good as the actual product, which is you
Yeah.
go, you drag in. So you can actually, if you have a Substack, for example, you can just type in the address to your Substack and it will automatically crawl that or any RSS
Oh,
enabled
that's
feed.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
So if you have a blog
because
or something already, you can. It's
it'll
trained very
immediately
quickly.
do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then if you have, let's say, all of your data are just in separate files on your machine, you can just upload that in one fell swoop, and then it goes to this protected server, and the server thinks about it for a while. It takes about 10, 20 minutes to train it, and then you can do a whole bunch of really cool stuff. One of the things, the sort of basic first thing that you can do is you can give it some text and have it rewrite that in your voice. So let's say you have something that either you've written or someone else has written, but you're not sure that it's kind of on the brand voice, let's say that you're trying to recreate, or it's been written by ChatGPT, so it's very generic. Um, you just push a button and it'll rewrite it immediately and give you the same text but in your voice. Or you can have it craft new
Ah.
documents in your voice. And this happens very quickly, and it's basically very much like the normal chat GPT experience, except it's doing something that's actually been trained on your real voice. And the really cool thing about it is that as you get more and more examples of your writing, so let's say you're writing a Substack and you have like 10 new articles every month or something like that, you can retrain it and have it update so that it reflects your most current kind of writing. There's also a lot of really cool things you can do once you've modeled someone's voice in a neural network. For example, you can take snapshots at different points in time, and you can have an analysis that says, this is the way you were writing 3 months ago, and this is the way you're writing now, and there's been some drift, and the drift is in this direction. And that's just not something you could ever do with a frontier model. You can have it argue against itself. So it can take all of
Ah,
the information that it's pulled from what you've given it, and you can say, hey, here's an idea for a new Substack article, let's say. Tell me if it contradicts anything that I've already said in any of my 100 or whatever Substack articles, or argue me out of saying it. And it'll be able to do all that in your voice.
so you can kind of have a
Another
thought
feature,
partner that's
it's like
using your own
it's a
words
thought
against you,
partner,
or helping
but it's
you process that. Yeah.
helping you process that, but with your written words and with your written style. And it's very powerful. Another feature that I've been working on that's really, really cool, I think, I think this is kind of the killer app part of it, is a chat bot, but it's a chat bot that speaks in your voice. And you can even actually, if you clone your voice, you can actually even have it literally speak in your voice. And you interrogate the chatbot just as you would a normal chatbot about your work. So you can go in and you can say, hey, what have I been talking about recently in my Substack? And what are some areas that maybe I've neglected that are still relevant to the field? And it will be able to look at everything that you've produced and give you, in your own words, a report. And you can say, hey, that's an interesting topic. Write up that topic for me right now. And it'll do that.
That's really cool. So you're
Yeah,
let me put some examples out there. So maybe
sure,
this would
sure.
be maybe for publicly facing documents, what, emails, blog posts,
Yeah,
where you're generating a lot of content, you have a voice, but you don't want to manually do a lot of these things. So it's kind of
that's
morphing
right.
or combining the roles of maybe like a virtual assistant slash secretary
Right.
with a copywriter. And the
Yes,
goal would be, I mean, good grief, you could exponentially increase your efficiency, but still sound genuine. And it's almost like you're
absolutely.
plagiarizing, but you're not because you're giving it its own, your
You're
voice and
right.
your content. I think that's people
Exactly.
crave that authenticity. You're doing that
Yes.
at scale with tools.
Yes. So there are a lot of, right. And the use cases are, for example, you're a marketing agency and you have a whole bunch of brand documents that say, this is how we want everything that goes out under our name to sound. And here are some examples of it. You can train it on that. If you're onboarding new people, it becomes much easier because instead of having to have them go through some training course about the proper way to discuss the brand, um, what you can do is just have it use this tool and it will go ahead and produce everything in the correct brand voice. If you're
I love
selling
it.
the company, you can do the same thing. You can say, we have all these brand voice documents, but you don't even need to use those because you can just on day one type stuff into this interface and it will give you uh, the kind of document that you're looking for. So it's got a lot of really exciting potential uses, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
exploding with ideas just talking to you about things where
Yeah, exactly.
InfoTech or any small business could really
Yeah.
take advantage of this. What
Yeah.
you mentioned this earlier a couple times, but I want to talk about the security aspect because I think that's really important. So you're
Yeah.
basically giving people the benefit of a local LLM that's not tied to the big frontier models, but you're
Right.
currently hosting it yourself, right? So it isn't technically local, it's local to you and the beta
It's
users.
local to the server and it doesn't go
Yeah,
out anywhere else. But there's nothing
sure.
inherent in the technology that would keep someone, you could replicate all of that in a day trivially on, let's say you're working for a big company and they want to use this, or even a marketing company. You could replicate the entire thing easily, well, in under a day, really, because it's just copying files. Um,
Sure.
in order to have it literally air gapped. And so you would have basically
Got it.
a white labeled version of this that would only work inside your private network, and you could conceivably, you don't need to even be connected to the internet because it's never going out to the internet to do any sort of ChatGPT or Claude or any of that sort of stuff.
Right.
The only thing that you would really, so if you're doing search, obviously, which you don't have to have, but search would be something where you would still want to be connected to the internet, obviously. But the search doesn't send your information out onto the internet, of
Yeah, it's
course.
still
What it does
siloed.
is it just sends some, keyword queries.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's, completely protected. And so, my view is the software as a service is probably good enough for a lot of people. But if people are really super concerned about security, then, we can talk and just put it on their inside their network.
Yeah. Well, I would think it would be something that people could host for themselves too. It's not like you have to have a data center
Absolutely.
in your office. I mean, you could throw up
Yeah.
an instance anywhere and put it on a server. I think that's pretty
Yes.
common these days.
Yeah.
Um, where do you see this going, Arshavir? I mean, I feel like you're in beta testing now, right? So it's really early,
That's
and
right.
you already have all these features and ideas. What's paint the vision in the next 12 to 18 months? What can people expect as maybe this becomes more commonplace? And I feel like we're on this AI curve, right? Like it's
Yeah.
going to get worse before it gets better, and you're in that
Right.
better phase already. I feel like.
Yeah.
Where do you see this going?
Well, I think the key to this particular technology, to this product, is that it's able to get better based on the input that you give it. So every time you enter in something in a chat window or every time you ask it a question, those are all potential things for it to learn about your personal style. So, unlike with a frontier model, which every time you go to it starts fresh, what you're able to do is build up a profile of your own work product and of your own content and interests and style. So, style is the key thing here. It's not just content, but it's also the style, so that what comes out actually sounds like something you wrote. So, I'm not sure where it's going to go. The market kind of is what
Yeah.
defines that. And so I have a lot of different ideas, like some of the things I've already talked to you about. And I think that the chatbot thing is very powerful, but we'll have to see, which aspects of this beta really appeal to people because, I tend to take to software development as a very flexible process. So I don't really see creating a whole bunch of features and then you're just stuck with them. I have actually on the website a list of what features would you like to see next, and you can check off. I think it would be interesting if it integrated with Evernote. I think it would be interested if it integrated with Google, things like that. So
Sure.
all of that is really kind of consequent to getting marketing feedback, and we're just very early in that stage. So,
Yeah. No, I
come
can
back to me in
understand.
a few months, and I can tell you,
Yeah.
hopefully, that some people like this feature, but I got rid of that feature because no one liked it, and I could be
Yeah.
wrong about the chatbot. I mean, it could be something that no one really finds particularly useful, but I think it's going to be a pretty cool thing because you get to basically talk to yourself,
Yeah.
and that's a
We'll
very
do that
compelling
anyway.
story.
So,
Yeah, exactly. But now you talk back, right?
yeah.
So
Yeah. Well,
that's
you're unique in that you're basically you're crowdsourcing almost a feature set, and you're providing the tool, and then your customers can take the tool and enhance
yes,
whatever they are doing, right? So
exactly.
your reach and your ripple effect, I think, could be huge.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm hoping. So we'll just have to see how the market reacts, as with anything, and we'll come back, talk to me in 3 or 6 months, and we'll
Yeah.
see. Well, hopefully there will have been some forward motion in that time.
Well, I'll definitely take you up on that. I keep a list of everyone on here because I do want to follow up and continue the journey, right? It's not just a
Yeah,
point in time, but everybody's
right.
on their own path. And I think that's
Yeah,
exciting to see people
it
develop.
is.
What would you tell people if they want to get a hold of you, Arshavir? I mean, you are the company right now. We'll definitely
Pretty
put your
much, yeah.
website and everything in the show notes. In fact, did we even say the name of the app? It's Your
It's
VoiceCraft.
YourVoiceCraft.ai.
Yeah.
And if you
Well, I have a
go to
terrible host towards the end before I
YourVoiceCraft.ai,
even
that's
start.
okay. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
go to that, you can do the free stylometric analysis in the free ChatGPT prompt. You don't have to put in any personal information. You just put in,
Okay.
whatever text you wanted to learn. If you want to get if you want to enroll in the beta trial, there's a little beta trial button at the top, and
Okay.
then we'll put you on the wait list. And the beta trial will let you use all the features. So there's three tiers, and the top tier is Studio, and that is the beta trial lets people use all the features of the product. And what's my goal or my hope is only that people doing a beta will give me lots and lots of feedback and tell me what they like, what they don't
Yep.
like, what's broken, what's working. So
Yeah.
that's the goal of the beta right now is to really shake out all the bugs
Yeah.
in it
Dial
because
it in.
it's exactly it's early software and so I'm sure there's a lot of places for improvement.
Well, you were kind enough to give me a beta a link, earlier, and
Yeah,
I was installing it and kicking the tires.
yeah,
And I even, like I shared with you before, I did give it to my CEO because
yeah,
we're struggling with how to scale relationships, right? In a
right.
world that's just overwhelmed with fake content, and like people are craving the
It's a
human touch,
problem.
and yet that's
Yes,
really, really hard to scale because you can only squeeze so much time out of a day.
yes,
So yeah, we'll definitely be kicking the tires, and I hope that our
absolutely.
audience
Please, yeah,
will
and
check it out as well.
every day I add new features to it, and there's a features list that I put in there so you can know. The chatbot I just added in very recently, and I'm still adding features to the chatbot. And as I said, my intuition is that's going to be the killer aspect of this app is that to be able to interact with your own written material in your voice and to have it respond in your voice and then when it produces new product have that written product be in your voice as well.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you today. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for your time. Like I
thank
said,
you.
we'll put all the links in our show notes so that people can reach out to you and hopefully get into this product more. And yeah, we'll definitely follow up in a few months and continue to follow along the
Great.
journey. I think there's a ton of potential here, and
Yeah,
hopefully people can check it out and it can help them grow and get better in their own roles. So
I hope
thank you
so.
so much.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it.
You bet. Take care.